What's a local legend horror story in your town everyone collectively believes or tells? That our local homeless guy, who was actually pretty famous, was on national TV a couple of times, was secretly a millionaire who went crazy when his wife died. Just a dumb story people tell because they think it's cool even though it's ridiculous. We had a similar story about a local homeless man who would be seen with a ragged old newspaper. The rumor was that it contained a story about his wife and children who had died in a fire. Not sure if it was true or not. We have the Bandage Man. It's basically a story of a guy who either got cut up, fell into a wood chipper, got into a fight with a bear, it really depends on who you ask, and now wanders the woods along the highway, covered in bandages. If you are unlucky enough to pull over, he'll get in your car and kill you. I just recently saw a flyer on the bulletin board at the local post office asking for people's stories so someone can make a mockumentary. There's an old summer camp far into the woods near my town. Every kid that goes there learns the story of Skibo Bates. When the camp first opened they had a big bonfire for all the kids that night and some of them started picking on poor young Skibo. He gets shoved and trips into the fire which sets his clothes up in flames and he runs from the beach into the large lake the camp was built near. They never found him that night or recovered his body. The counselors all say if you sneak out of your cabins at night Skibo will find you and take his revenge. Yes, I know it's balls to scare and keep the young kids in their cabins at night. There are all kinds of people in my part of Texas who swear they've seen a chupacabra. I haven't, but I did once see two enormous cougars jump across the road in front of my car, chasing a deer. Looked like house goods, but 8 feet from nose to tail. I've seen two small hairless critter the size of a fox or raccoon, but hairless. I always assumed they were just mangy raccoons. There is a road on the outskirts of town called Constitution Doctor. It is an unpaved road that led to an old looking farmhouse after about a mile down. The legend is that in this house an entire family of inbred albino people live there and that they will murder anyone who gets too close to the house. It's constantly driven on by teenagers smoking weed and stuff and no one has ever been murdered so. The one time I drove down it however there were a pair of headlights behind my friends and I, which scared the crap out of us and made us turn around. When we turned around the other car was gone that was behind us. It was pretty freaky. It's a very narrow road with a cliff on one side and a steep hill on the other so it's not easy to turn around and disappear. There is a road in a wooded area near where I live and the street is literally called Hairy Man Road. Legend goes that there was a kid who was separated from his family when they were trying to escape some bad weather. In the 1800s, he ended up surviving alone in the woods and terrorized people who would come through. Eventually he was trampled to death by some people horses passing by that he tried to scare. I forget how weird the name of the road is until I have to say it out loud. There are Hairy Man festivals each year in my town, and the hairiest man legit wins a prize. So weird mayo. LOL, I'm giggling at the thought of a Hairy Man festival. There's an urban legend in my town about a bus full of children in the 70s that went up Gold Camp Road, this narrow, dirt incline into the mountains, and went over the side, killing everyone on the bus. Legend has it that if you drive up that road and park your car where the bus went over the side, you'll get little handprints all over your car from the ghost children. It's amazing to me how many locals still believe this story. I remember my friend doing this and awaiting the handprints. She said they never came. There's a rundown mansion outside of the small town I grew up in. Story is back in the day the owners had a massive house party, but the second floor collapsed due to the weight and killed several. The dude who owns it legit lives next to it in a small trailer. The driveway is really long and covered with trees, so we would try to see who could get closest to the house before he noticed and started shooting his rifle in the air. I don't think kids mess with it that much anymore though. If it's that rundown, he probably couldn't afford to fix it and it was cheaper to buy a trailer to live in. I see that a lot with old properties and always think it's a shame. There's this pockmarked ghoul who lives in the woods in my neighborhood. Some believe he preys on teen girls. Most of the time though he drinks alone in his tent, screaming racist profanities sometimes until 4 AM. We don't know what to do about it. Some people built a house in our town. It's a waterfront property with a swimming pool for some reason. It's surrounded by security fence and even has spotlights. People in town referred to the place as Mafia Retreat. I met the people who live there. They are the second owners. Although we don't know much about the original owners, the people who live there currently had it officially renamed to Mafia Retreat. Kids would always talk about a bridge called Gibbs Bridge being haunted, and they would go there in like middle school to be edgy kids. There were about 1,000 different stories about why it's haunted, but everyone claims they've seen ghosts or heard the pickup truck of the dead guy. I crossed the bridge once. It's barely even a bridge and it's just over a tiny creek and it's just full of graffiti and in the middle of the country. Last year on Mother's Day, a guy walked into my town's only grocery store carrying a severed head. It was his mom's head, BTW. He stabbed a worker of the store and went absolutely batty. No matter how many people I explain it to, they all think he was from our little podunk town. He wasn't. He walked about 10-12 miles to take his mom to the store on Mother's Day. It's kinda been a blessing and a curse really. Weird hipsters stay away from our town, thinking it is filled with nut jobs, while crazy homeless druggies flock to our town like it's Mecca. The brag lights. Railroad worker was holding a lantern, fell and hit his head, got run over, decapitated. Now you see his light as he looks for his head, except there are no records anywhere of such an incident anywhere near here. There's a rural road just outside of town that people say is haunted. One time some friends and I drove over there and we were driving real slow, kinda just giggling and crap, and a cop pulls us over and tells us to leave. I think a lot of teens just go there to smoke and crap. I've lived in several towns, ones with populations from 100,000, 5,000 people. There's always a group of people, usually moderately successful in business, who party hard together. The rest of the town are convinced there's partner swapping sharing going on at these gatherings. Never been any evidence and no one's seen it, but have always heard from a friend of a friend who was at the party, but left when the shenanigans started. Hey, it's probably happened occasionally, but every time? I've had the same experience, but with Freemasons and Satan worshipping Satanists being added to the story as the towns get smaller. Chapel Hill, TN. The story varies based on who tells it, but I'll tell you the gist. Long ago, when train tracks had to be manually switched, a switch operator was killed by an oncoming train. Legend has it that to this day you can see him carrying his lantern down the tracks. People have reported it moving through their cars when stopped on the tracks at night. There are videos on YouTube of the light. Chapel Hill is a small town, so the lights from an airplane or lights from cars going X direction don't explain it. Most people around here, if pressed, would tell you they tend to believe it due to so many people experiencing it. Native West Texan, Lavarona, El Chupacabra, and aliens are very real to us. El Chupacabra is usually blamed for livestock deaths, sheep and goats on small ranches. People will buzz about it for a day or two and it'll be over. No offense to sheep, but they're dumb enough to accidentally kill themselves, and I don't think they need much help. Lavarona wasn't part of my collective conscience until I was older, but people keeping their kids away from rivers was very common in my area, though absolutely with good reason, because water quality and flash flooding made it sketchy at best. Aliens? Now that's the one I'm more willing to believe. West Texas is extremely empty, in case you've never been, so you see strange lights in some of the darkest and most isolated parts of the country? That's weird. That's worth suspicion. One very localized one was told to me by my Spanish teacher in high school: the Ghost Motel up one of the highways outside of town. It looked like a 50s drive-in motel, and when he first moved here it was open. People were there, lights were on, and he stopped and talked to the desk clerk asking for directions. When he got into town, allegedly he mentioned it to his neighbor and they told him the place had been closed for 30 years. He drove back, and sure enough it was boarded up, abandoned, and in awful shape. People made a habit of going out there on dares, and there's been a few weird stories, but I'm suspicious of the merit to them. The Manchester Pusher. Manchester, England is a city with a large downtown canal and river network. There's an urban legend that a serial killer is active who wanders the city's waterways and pushes people into the water and leaves them to drown. According to the local police, there were 28 unexplained deaths in the water between 2008 and 2014. Family members of some of these victims insist that their loved one's death was no accident, even though the police have written off the pusher as an urban legend. The Hoop Snake. Indigenous to the Mississippi in the Minnesota, Wisconsin area. It's a snake that bites its tail and chases you like a hula hoop. That visual is weirdly funny tbh. There is this old abandoned underway of this bridge that is supposedly haunted, and if you walk too far in it you'll be cursed. So no one did it for the longest time until some guys at my high school finished the walk, and all it is now is people smoking weed. I don't think it was ever haunted. I just come from a very gullible town. There's one road in the town I was born in that's supposedly one of the most haunted places in New Jersey. It's called Clinton Road, and it's a really long stretch with all forest on one side and a lake on the other with no fence in between or street lights. People have reported seeing headlights behind them then turning around and there's no car there, seeing phantom hitchhikers, etc. My favorite story though is that there's the ghost of a little boy there that will throw your coins back into the road if you toss them into the lake. One time when my brother and I were little, we threw a coin into the lake to see if it would happen. And my dad noticed, so he slyly threw another one out the window and into the street. We figured it out eventually, but he scared the crap out of us. Lumfeo. Upvote for troll dad. So the high school I went to has a trailer with a crawl space under it that is on a hill, so if you go under it from the front and go as far as you can, you'll eventually hit hill. When I was in high school I made up a story to the freshmen who wanted to go under there to smoke that a kid disappeared back there and nobody ever found his body, and it was thought that a hobo or M-head ate him. That scared them, and I guess they told their parents or someone at school about it, and the cops came and brought a K9 unit to investigate because apparently there was a missing kid from the school. I wasn't aware. Obviously they didn't find anything, but my nephew goes to that school now, 6 years later, and the seniors still tell the freshmen about the cannibal hobo under the trailer. Guess my story was just feasible enough to stick. I live in a small town in Wisconsin. There's an urban legend my grandparents would tell that supposedly an old crazy farmer had sex with a coyote, thus creating a small coyote man child that now lives in the woods and eats people's pet cats. The legend is totally fictitious, but when I was young I had a lot of childhood cats go missing and it always scared me, lol. The cats are probably getting eaten by actual coyotes. They'll nab cats and small dogs easily and frequently. Not really a local legend, but the older residents are scared to death of the lake I live on. It's considered two separate lakes, but are hydrologically the same. It's relatively small and separated by a peninsula that juts halfway out into the lake. The one they're afraid of has a steep bank and deepens to 50 feet quickly. The water is an unnatural dark color, almost black, and they absolutely refuse to swim in it. Why they own a home on said lake is beyond me. I don't swim in it not because of the fear, but because the water is absolutely disgusting and has a certain smell. Have the city officials test the water. While growing up my small town in the middle of Illinois, 1,200 people, we had a family of Italians move in and start a pizza restaurant. I have traveled a lot in my 30 years, and to this day that pizza was the best pizza I've ever had. Puts all New York pizza to shame. Now, these Italians didn't speak a word of English. Rumor was that when they first opened the store, the local newspaper wanted to write a story on them, and they absolutely refused. Local legend is they are mafia and witness protection. As someone who grew up in a small town in the middle of Illinois, 1,000 people, this interests me greatly because small Midwestern towns just don't have random Italians who make bomb pizza in them. The assassination of President William McKinley at the Pan Am Expo in 1903 cursed the region and led to the Buffalo Bills losing 4 Super Bowls in a row. 1999 Stanley Cup no goal. There's a railroad crossing in downtown San Antonio where supposedly some kids were killed. If you dust your deck lid with flour and park your car on the tracks, the ghosts of the kids will push your car off the tracks, and you'll see their handprints on the car. And if that doesn't work you can get hit by a train and start the cycle again. A lot of my classmates believe that our school was an old Cold War era bunker before being built. My school opened up in 1960, and the only evidence people cite to prove this story is a hatch in the floor of the makeup room for theater kids that no one is allowed to open. Nothing comes up when you search my school about bunkers, so it's safe to say that the legend is not true. You'll never truly know until you open up that hatch. We just had these random weird guys Mental not on the good side so to say. There was the Rainmaker man who would stand on random fields for hours and run toward random people screaming if they came near. He would always do some weird dances and prayer crap and every day be at another village. This is why he was called the Rainmaker. The other guy was some boy. He was 19 years old last I heard of him, who would always chase children and some adults while having a knife in hand. He carved some figures with that knife and wanted to show off his figures, but he'd always have his knife in the other hand. So he would wait at the bus stop and children get out. They freak out at a guy running with a knife at them and run away and he runs after them. Both were not dangerous, just creepy AF. They tell that if you stay late at a bar close to the abandoned part of the city, you would notice the figure of a very sexy girl trying to make you follow her. She doesn't turn around neither speak at any time and is wearing a veil covering her face. You would feel like hypnotized by her perfume and her hips making you follow her to the most dark part of the town. When you reach a very old and creaky house, she would turn around and reveal her face, and then, suddenly her smell becomes the one of rotten meat and her face would be one full of worm's skull. If you run away, you would be safe, but if she gets to kiss you, you would instantly die and your body would never be found. This one sounds Central South American. Y'all are all about your femme fatale down there. My uni's legend says that whoever eats from the mulberry tree growing behind the linguistics building shall never graduate, and if they graduate, they shall pursue academic career and never leave the university. I live about half a mile from a house where a guy killed his parents with a hatchet. When I give locals directions to my house they say oh yeah, turn where the axe murders were. That our local dam, that is the second biggest in the country, has mutant catfish in it. It was built in the 80s with the intention to supply nearby fields with water, but due to some complications it never reached its intended goal. Anyways, on the bottom of the dam there are 2 villages and the people from it were forced to move to nearby towns' villages in order for the dam to be built. The only thing that is not entirely engulfed by water is the church of one of the villages, Zivovtsi, which is the birthplace of my grandma, and the icons are gone, everything. The only eerie and creepy thing staying is a highly erased but still recognizable mural of Satan. Some believe that this is a reminder of the buried lives, stories and memories at the bottom of the dam. The other thing about the dam is that many people believe there are mutant monster catfish lurking in the depths. I'm not sure about this statement, but I do believe there was some kind of chemical substance leak from a nearby mine, which essentially contaminated the water with arsenic and thus the mutations happened. So, a local story that my father told me was that a person drowned and divers were sent to find the body. When they got out of the water, they were speechless and in panic. Now, the scary thing is that the hair of one of them partially turned white from fear and the lips of the other one were pale white. When confronted about what happened they only said that they saw freaking huge catfish, over 4-5 meters, lurking in the deep. The interesting fact is that in 2016 a local fisherman actually caught a freaking 2-meter catfish that was bigger than a human. So, yeah, there definitely are big freaking fish down there, but no one dares to go and dive after the story with the divers. Another story that I've heard is from other divers that do it as a hobby, who dived and were terrified of the view. A nearly pitch dark environment, only their flashlights, or the things divers use to bring light into the darkness, haha, and the lights they had actually revealed a scary scenery, huge patches of forests, abandoned machinery, remains of houses and even a graveyard. Safe to say, they noped the frick out of the waters. The final thing, which is not so scary but definitely catastrophic if happens. The dam is located above the town and the wall supporting it is not maintained regularly. There are many reports about the surrounding land and rocks that state that the wall may crack if not renovated. If this happens, the whole town will be flooded and possibly wiped out because of the sheer size of the dam. I can only imagine what could happen. So, yeah, if you are interested, there are other creepy stories, legends about the town that I can tell you about. I'd like to hear your stories. Old haunted tuberculosis hospital. I've got friends too who live 50 feet from it too. That, and we have haunted bridge, and a road that's famous in town for having a crap ton of car accidents, including an accident that I actually got in with friends when I was younger. Oh man, suddenly wondering if we're neighbors because we have the same sort of thing. Lots of stories floating around about the brutality that went to go down there, along with the eventual decommissioning of the place due to said outbreak. My town had a haunted house in it. It's not actually haunted. Why I say this? I started the rumor. We were goofing off one night back in high school years and went driving around. We found this old dilapidated house and went spelunking. I took pictures with the flash on just to take pictures. My reasoning was that I wanted to try and capture a ghost. Well anyways, I take the pictures home and Photoshop a demonic looking ghost face into one of the windows and mass texted to everyone I knew. Word spread that it was haunted, so I played it up. I'd make up stories and say that this guy told me about it. Then when he'd be like, "Huh, I don't remember that," I'd remind him about it. Sure enough, 4 or 5 elder people in the town have stories about the haunted house. There's a woman in my hometown who is a little strange. She stares at people and acts a little erratically, often having arguments with herself. The apparent story of why she is like that is that she was once very successful in the financial industry and that one day on her way to getting lunch she got hit by a bus, giving her brain damage. This one is sad. Like, urban legend aside, it's sad. I hope she gets help or whatever she might need. The Banana Fairy. Oh, he is a magical young man who skateboards around town at night in a banana suit and fairy wings and gives those who he deems worthy presents. Mostly drugs but sometimes snack cakes. I saw him a bunch since I was an avid late night wanderer, but my favorite time was seeing him doing laundry at the laundromat while I was driving to town. I assumed the poor guy had run out of clothes and was forced to don his alter ego attire. Much love, Banana Fairy. I was born in Hawaii and everyone there knows about the Night Marchers, who are spirits of ancient warriors that kill invaders or non-relatives of the tribesmen and the march. From what I remember, my brother who always say they would come for me first because I was half Haole, much to my terror. That back in the day, people were kidnapped via tunnels under the city and pressed into service as sailors. It's not true. Press gangs were a well-documented thing. As for your particular city, I couldn't really say. The part about the tunnels does sound like bulls though. Where I grew up, it was a popular urban legend to stumble upon satanic ritual sites. Basically a building graffiti-ed with pentagrams and heck or devil rules. One time I was wandering in a field around my house and found the remains of a small bonfire and a bunch of liquor bottles. The scary part was an old rusty animal cage and we found a raccoon skeleton in the area. Pretty sure it was coincidence and obnoxious teens, but it got our imaginations going. Hey, not really a horror story but more a superstition. A lot of hairdressers are closed on Wednesdays because it's bad luck to get your hair cut then. According to a website, it says in the ancient times people believed that Wednesday was the day of growth and development. It was also considered auspicious time. The members of royal family and noblemen prefer to have a haircut on Wednesdays. Therefore there was a rule to prohibit common people to have a haircut in the same day. It was considered an auspicious event to do the same activity in the same day, as if you tried to compare your prestige to the royal family. Don't know if that counts though. Holcomb Road. It's haunted. It's not disputed. It's in buttfuck nowhere, Ohio. It's a little old road that goes through the Holcomb Woods. Your gas levels plummet the longer you're on the road, and if you turn the car off there's a good chance it won't start right back up. You can see children's faces in the greenery, supposedly the spirits of the children who died in a school bus accident. Classic. If you park at the entrance of the woods you'll see a light that doesn't belong. If you go into the woods the light will literally chase you out. It's local legend and everyone knows it as fact here. Lake Tahoe is the second largest perfectly preserved mortuary in the world. The water below 600 featuring is permanently at 39 degrees Fahrenheit or below, so no bacteria grows and bodies don't decay, bloat and rise to the surface. No one wants to go down and actually check because the lake used to be a burial ground for a few of the Native American tribes originally in the area, and doing so would obviously be very disrespectful. There are apparently also tons of bodies of Chinese workers from when the Transcontinental Railroad was being built as well. The lake also has an undercurrent that spins counterclockwise, so the bodies are constantly moving in a circle. There's allegedly thousands of bodies down there, and no one is willing to check. When people go missing in the lake, they can't be retrieved past 200 feet, since you can't see. The filmmaker as Jacques Cousteau actually went down there in a submarine, and there is transcript available somewhere of what he reportedly saw. and he said the world is not ready for what's down there. I didn't believe the story until I went out on a charter fishing boat and we pulled up a piece of scalp, hair still on it and everything. It looked like our lure scratched the side of the dude's face. No decay at all. We just cut the line and pretended it didn't happen. Holy crap. There's a road called Lick Road that dead ends into a nature preserve where a woman named Amy has said to be murdered and her baby kidnapped. They say if you go to the end of the road and say, "Amy, I have your baby," she'll appear and attack you. There's also a haunted bar called Bobby McKee's that used to be like a slaughterhouse or something, and all of the workers died and now haunt the building. It's basically become a museum exhibit now, and I don't think anyone actually believes it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.